Human beings have only been in a mental crisis for a very short period of time. Um, we've been just about completely human for millions of years, and for 80,000 years, we've been completely, DNA us, brains working exactly the way that our brains work today. For most of that time, that's a long time, the way our brains worked just fit in with the natural world. And one of the reasons for that was because of our ability to tell stories and share knowledge through stories. When you use stories, a myth, what we today will call myth, but they're not untrue, because what a myth does is paints a picture in our full mind, what we today would call the left brain and the right brain, or all the different nodes of the brain. It creates pictures that help us live with each other and live with the world and understand the world. It's a really important function of the human brain to be able to see patterns in the past and put them together to understand what's going to happen in the future. Winter's going to come. We need to store up some food. Someone behaved badly. More than likely that person's going to behave badly again unless, we intervene. Earthquakes, um, day and night. I mean, so many things about being human is because of our ability to remember what happened in the past, put stories to it, and project that into the future. It's a totally good human thing to be able to do that. Where we went wrong, or what we would call the beginning of our mental crisis, was when our stories stopped matching up with our full mind. When we started taking fantasy, I don't know how to describe it, turning it into myth. Or we started using our stories to make us believe that we weren't part of the world, that we were the dominant species, that we were the ones in charge of the world, that, we were the bosses of everything. And then, of course, we started having people being bosses of other people. And it just altogether led to a state of confusion where what's going on inside of our brain is not useful to our mental health. So, non duality and Zen teachings, and actually just any spiritual teachings, Christianity does the same thing, where it is trying to take this disconnect that has happened inside our imagining of who we are and turn it into something useful, a useful way to live. In Zen and non-duality, what the teaching is telling us is that you have a mental disease. Something is wrong with the way your brain works. And so you can't trust any of it, because you will always use these, golly, I don't want to call them myths. I'll just call them stories and dreams and things that you've been told. You will always use those to try to piece together how everything works. That's, dogma, and it just gets more and more and more complicated. Here's a really easy way to think about it. When you're telling a lie, you have to keep all your facts in line all the time in order to continually support the lie. If you mess up, the people that you're lying to are going to start figuring it out, right? Your brain's full of lies. So non-duality says, okay, so what do we do? What do we do about this? This is what Zen says. This is what Buddha was looking for. something's wrong in my perception. What do I do about it? And the solution is actually very, very simple. What you have to do is bring yourself to a point of total zero. You have to go, I am me. My brain is not me. My mind is not me. These stories, I can't trust a single one of them. So you bring yourself down to complete zero. And when you get to the place where you know who you are as not identified with the mind, not identified with the emotions, then that's like day one. That's where you then start being a full human being and being able to piece together like pieces of things like, is it useful to love? Well, yeah, you could figure that out even without going to zero, right? But you go completely to zero and you're like, obviously, yes, that's good. You know, what stories, what sort of history? This is really, really what scientists do, because they basically say, okay, here's the world. We want to figure it out. Everything has to be a theory to start out with until it's proven. And then as science got more and more complex, they started realizing, you know, you can only prove very few things and everything else remains a mystery, which is really cool because it keeps you in this constantly curious state. So stories and myths. Think of myths as stories that used to really, really work within the context of how we lived. And when you bring yourself down to this point of zero, when you allow yourself to just go, okay, everything's a theory. Nothing's fixed. Don't be fixed on things. Then you can start looking at the old stories and go, well, are they useful or not? One really, really good book that describes this is Braiding Sweetgrass. And in that book, at the very beginning, the very first chapter, if you can only just read the first chapter, read the first chapter. And she talks about the myth of her people, about how Sky Woman came down to Earth and how she got all the plants going and everything. She compares it to the Christian myth of Eve was bad. She was, first of all, she's not even a person. She's just a rib, right? And then she was bad and she ate the apple and she got thrown out of paradise. And so in the one myth, everybody's living in paradise and part of paradise. And even the younger brother, the younger cousin who is there to learn from all of existence, to the other story of we're the bosses of everything and we're bad anyway to start out with. And I mean, just look at those two myths right there, those two stories right there, and you can just see how this one really makes us live in harmony. And this one just makes us not a part of the world. It's like, no wonder we all have mental problems, right? So non-duality and Zen stories are so good because what they do is they just kind of take a little scenario and then just almost end it in a joke where they just kind of split it apart. Like our Zen story from this week about the fertility miracle is really good about that, because the Zen master does not behave at all like you expect he should behave. You know, he's supposed to make this miracle. And instead he tries to do a trick. So you can come down to this zero. And that's what the whole thing is. And it doesn't have to be a big, huge, dramatic deal. Just accept the fact that all these things that are in our brain right now are not reliable. And it's not you. that's not you. That's just something that's been stories that have been put there. Like you can read a book, um, Harry Potter. You read Harry Potter, right? That's just a story. You're not Harry Potter. I mean, it has all sorts of good little truths and, um, nice things about learning how to live and deal with life, but you're not the book. You can take the book, you put it down. That's not you. It's just something that went into your brain before you read the book. It wasn't there. After you read the book, now you have this story in your head. It's not you. It is a tool that's been put in there. It's a story. So this is what we're trying to do with non-duality, is erase the insanity in a very simple way. Because you basically say it's all insanity. It's all nuts. What is the 0 point? Who is you? What is the you that's not nuts? It's your actual being. It's the part that decides which one of these stories you want to listen to. But you got to know who you are in order to step out of the madness and start becoming an agent to really change things. Unless you step completely out of it, you're going to always be spinning stories from your insanity. So maybe we could say non-duality is simply a way to become solidly sane. So anytime you're arguing about all sorts of things, it's like, well, you say you're not your mind. Now you've divided yourself into you and your mind. It's like anytime, you got that yucky, crazy thing going on, it's like, no, stop. You're not that decision. You don't have to understand it with English, with words. Just quiet it down, quiet it down. You're not that, you're not that, you're not that. Who are you? Find that